right, hello everybody. I am out sick, having some symptoms. I don't feel terrible just yet, but I think I have to take a COVID test. So I'll let you know what I find out. I didn't want to give it to anybody else if that's what's going on. So I'm gonna stay home today. The plan is to go through and get you some of the stuff that you're gonna need because we need to keep going. I'm not sure how long this will last, so I'm going to try to keep this as normalized as possible. You're watching the video, so that's a good sign. I'm going to open up today's assignment called Imperialism Introduction. And I'm going to have you open up the note sheet and make a copy so that you can take notes. And this is what you're going to turn in for today's work. And here's the deal. Fast forward to the end of the unit, you're going to have a unit assessment where you have to talk about some of the characteristics of an empire and give some examples after we've studied during this unit. So these notes are not just to fill up your time today, but it's actually to give you kind of the basis for what you're going to need later, right? So we can connect dots. So it's not super complicated, pretty straightforward, just taking notes today. The key to the 5 characteristics is to try to put the information into your own words so it makes sense to you. The goal is not necessarily just to turn in the sheet. The goal is for you to understand what imperialism is and what these characteristics are. So you can pause me anytime if you feel like I'm going fast. That's the beauty of the video. Pause me, rewind, do what you need to do. But our goal is to try to understand the big ideas here. So, definition of an empire. You studied this in world history. We have a group of states or countries ruled over by another sovereign state. So the word state with a lowercase s is not like the state of Minnesota. It's like it means country. So a sovereign state is any country that can make its own laws. Okay. So if you have a country or a group of countries that are ruled by another country that is making rules for them, that is the definition of an empire. Okay, so examples down at the bottom, we have the British Empire. Remember, in world history, Great Britain controlled not only the British Isles, but also India and into Asia and into Africa and the United States at one point, and Canada and Australia, right? They had a huge empire. The Russian Empire, the Roman Empire, these are all examples of one state controlling and ruling over other countries, okay? So the real question that we're going to get into for this unit is what is the United States doing during this time period? I'm sure in world history you studied imperialism and all these European countries fighting for territory. How much of that was the U.S. involved in? So in order to do that, we kind of have to know what's happening here. And to start with, we're going to get into the characteristics of an empire. So there are 5. We'll go through them one by one. Our first slide says empires are built out of separate units with some kind of diversity. And they imply at least some inequality between the rulers and the ruled. So if you think about diversity, we can think about ethnic diversity, different ethnicities. We can think about national diversity, different nations, different cultures, different religions. If you think about the British Empire, you had Britain, and that's a particular ethnic group. They are white Anglo-Saxons, and they are controlling places like India with people that are ethnically different and have different religion. And there's an inequality between the British and their subjects. So this would cover the British Empire for sure. Okay, so our second one, our second characteristic says many empires were the result of military conquest. They incorporated the vanquished states into a political union, but imperial hegemony can be established in other ways. There's a lot of words here, so let's break it down. First of all, hegemony is a fancy word that means dominance. So one country dominant over another country. Okay, so it says most of the time empires happen because one country conquers another using their military. Okay, although it says that kind of dominance can happen in other ways. It doesn't have to be military. In some cases, they use economics or other tools. So we'll actually see with some of the examples in the US, that we don't send in the military necessarily to take over the whole country. We just kind of bully them into it using money and business. So that's characteristic number 2. Number 3, weaker states may seek annexation into the empire. The word annexation means to be incorporated into. So when we talked about American history last semester, and we talk about states coming into the Union, like Texas. Texas for a while was an independent country, and then it gets annexed by the U.S. It becomes part of the United States. We're going to see in this unit places like Hawaii and Alaska become annexed into the United States. So oftentimes weaker states want to get incorporated into that larger country. 4th characteristic says politically it is typical for either a monarchy, a king, or an oligarchy, which is a group of leaders, to continue to dominate. So what happens is it's kind of like a puppet leader, indirect control. So what happens is England moves into India and they're in charge, but they leave certain Indian leaders to run the country in essence. But the British are really the ones deciding what India is going to do, but they leave, a person in that country to kind of make decisions and make it look good. So sometimes, the country gets taken over, they leave their king in place, and it's really the imperial country that's in charge, even though the king still exists. Our last one, it says, empires were seen as an expanding power, and empires tend to impose their culture on the subject states to strengthen the imperial structure. And these can be good and not so good in terms of their effects. So the empire imposes its culture on the countries that they take over. So if you look at one of the popular sports in India, it is cricket. Okay, cricket is a British sport. Why do they still play cricket in India? Because they were a part of the British Empire for a long time. If you look at Vietnam, France controlled Vietnam for a period of time during this era. And if you look at Vietnamese food, there are French elements in the food. So that is, French culture then getting kind of imposed on those subject states. So I'm going to suggest at this point that review those 5 characteristics. If you have to rewind and listen again, if you can put the kind of fancy language into words that make sense to you. I tried to highlight in red the most important parts. So if you can make sure that these 5 characteristics make sense, that is step 1. Step 2, if I look at our notes, says why imperialism? And the question is, why do countries do this? It says countries do this for either economic reasons or geopolitical reasons. So economic reasons has to do with business and money. So the first example down below, Spain controlled Cuba. Cuba was a colony of Spain. And the reason Spain wanted to control Cuba was because they had sugar cane, and that was a big ticket item, a way to make a lot of money in that period. Great Britain controlled the U.S. colonies before we became independent, and that was about economics, because then the colonies can buy the stuff that the British are making, right? And they can make money off of the colonies that way. Geopolitical means there's something strategic about that particular place, their location. So the example we have for geopolitical reasons is Great Britain controlled Gibraltar, which is an important place for sea routes coming in and out of the Mediterranean from the Atlantic. So if you think kind of right in between Spain and Africa, North Africa, that little spot, that's Gibraltar. So whoever controls that spot then has control over which ships come in and out of the Mediterranean, which would be a big deal. So economic and geopolitical reasons, and we have some examples here. What I want you to do is once we're done here, you're going to watch this video, and it'll give you kind of the quick version of American history as it relates to imperialism. And then when you're finished, I'm asking you to summarize the big ideas from what we've talked about. That should be the characteristics as well as some of the things that happen later. So try to take all of the stuff that we've talked about and write it in your own words, 3 to 4 sentences. And that's it for the assignment. Your video notes go in the blue box. Your summary goes in that bottom box. And that's it for today. When you're done, if you have some things from earlier in the week to finish, I would try to get those things done. Tomorrow is going to be a map day, and it'll be pretty straightforward. So we're going to just keep kind of working our way through the unit, and it should be reasonable. If you have textbook work to do, you can work on that. If you have any of the assignments from that first part of the semester, let's get this stuff in so we're caught up. As always, when I'm gone, you can email me if you have any questions, and I'll do what I can to try to help if you need help. But otherwise, I will see you when I see you. How's that? Have a good afternoon.